Good afternoon. Rich Nast, Executive Vice President with Open Systems Media, here for an embedded solutions video with Haydn Povey. Haydn is the General Manager of the Embedded Security Solutions Division at IAR Systems. He's also the CEO of Secure Thingz. And on top of that, he's probably the most well-versed guy that I've ever come across with respect to security. So he's the perfect guy to have this conversation with. So Haydn, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm great, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. Before you get into the actual presentation, I'd just like you to clarify the relationship between Secure Thingz and IAR, so that's not confusing, because you have one title for one company and another title for the company, but they're actually all sort of the same now, right?
That's right. So I started Secure Thingz about 7 years ago after spending over a decade at ARM. So I headed up all of the security technologies at ARM, as well as microcontroller technology. And we progressed well with Secure Thingz. And then about 2.5 years ago, we got acquired by IAR. The company Secure Thingz exists as a wholly owned subsidiary, so we still manage the company and the brand. It's a very strong brand, I think, in the industry, and we have a cost base here in the UK. However, we also often want to demonstrate how we are part of the larger organization, and hence we do have a divisionalized approach to how we run the company. The relationship with IAR is a really interesting one. I've been working with the team there for over 17 years, since I kicked off the Cortex-M processors at ARM, and have built a great relationship over the time. But it's obviously also important that we bring security into the development flow. One of the big problems with security solutions in the embedded space especially is that companies need to take ownership of it. They need to own the security, how it's wedded into their products. And so many people just sell a solution, and you have to take it as it is. Our approach is that it has to be integrated into the development flow, and that we have to enable the hundreds of thousands of embedded developers to take that ownership of security. So part of the acquisition was ensuring that security is reshaped from a solution, from a thing, into the development flow, and hence the products, our embedded trust is fully wedded into embedded workbench, and it should become very much a natural flow between the two sides.
So I think that last piece really wraps it all together. If I'm an embedded developer, I'm already using embedded workbench, probably. Now this tool is part of that tool, right?
That's absolutely right. The reality is there is a huge shortage of cybersecurity experts globally. 3.5 million cybersecurity engineers and personnel globally. It's a huge number. And of course, we can't fix that. We can't educate our way through it. It's too big a number. Instead, we have to bring security into the standard flows, into the standard development techniques. And really, that's what we're trying to do with the products and with the technology. So in the presentation today, what I'd like to do is give you an update on where the security is situated right now from an embedded perspective, and how we see that evolving, and how we think we can help people with their security. The reality, first of all, is the Internet of Things is a huge industry. As I just said, there are hundreds of thousands of developers all doing different things. It's estimated there'll be over 1 trillion IoT connections by 2035, a global impact of $5 trillion. This is a truly an inflection point for the industry. And how we deal with that and how we manage it is really, really important. But we're not going to be able to do it with a one-size-fits-all solution. We've got to get it wedded into the product. Now, that does mean that the security requirements are shifting. First of all, security is already seen as the leading barrier to IoT adoption. So 45% of respondents to a recent UK survey felt that security had held back IoT adoption. And that's certainly true of things like industrial, smart city, smart transportation systems. In the consumer electronics domain, 70% of consumers have said that they would buy more Internet of Things connected devices if security was better resolved. And I know that's personally very true for me. I don't have an Alexa or an Echo device in my home because right now I don't trust who has access to that data. And I know I'm fairly paranoid from that perspective, but I think it is testament to where we are. It's no surprise that this is an issue. The last metrics we've really seen are that only 4% of connected devices include sufficient security. And sufficient security in this case really is that base hygiene level. So is there a unique identity? Is there the ability to update the product correctly? Is privacy maintained? These are, not exotic requirements, but only 4% of devices have them. And, we see a real challenge to get organizations to move that forward. Again, not a surprise, there are 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs unfilled today. So the way in which I think we're going to see this being impacted is through legislation. We have legislation now in Europe. We have legislation in the UK, and in Europe, the new EN 303645 standard really has adopted the 13 best practices as a requirement for any connected device in Europe. And ENISA, the EU standards enforcement body, has recently given guidance on how they are going to expect to see this being pulled through. In the US, as you'll know, California, Oregon already have laws in place around consumer electronics. And prior to the election, the House of Representatives had passed the Cybersecurity Improvement Act, which required Homeland Security and CISA to work with NIST to drive the standards there. So we are seeing these requirements moving forward. There is a huge requirement if we really are to get to 1 trillion IoT endpoints to make sure that security works from the foundations, really this security from inception. We recently ran some polling data around the criticality of security, and not surprisingly, I think most people came back and said that security is absolutely essential, which is in itself very good news. People are paying attention. They understand that it's going to come and hit them. The main reality, though, on the right-hand side is when we ask people to rate their knowledge on the IoT security legislation, they say, I should know something, I should do something about it, but I don't know where to start. And this is something where I think we can really help, both through some of these videos and working with you guys at Embedded Computing Design, but also through the tools. You shouldn't have to be an expert in cybersecurity to be able to resolve that. We don't expect people to be experts in cryptography in order to use cryptographic libraries. It's an unreasonable expectation. So our goal is to make it very easy to implement the 13 best practices, which underpin the EU legislation and the UK legislation. And also very easy to achieve the IEC 62443 requirements, which are driving industrial IoT domains. The reality about security is that it doesn't need to be applied just at a single point. It's not something that you can build and forget about. It really is something which has to go through the entire life cycle of the product, from the design requirements. And on this slide, we can see, our design requirements are the legislation, the 13 best practices, the codes of practice, such as the IEC 62443, but also the threat model. And in fact, in the industrial domain, we do see this called out more strongly with level 1, 2, 3, and 4, where level 1 is protection against accidental impacts, through to protection against rogue employees, up to level 2, which is protection against ransomware. And we all know how that's impacting the industry. And level 4 is really protection against a sophisticated attack, such as a nation state attack. Often the nation state attacks do sound a bit like James Bond or Jason Bourne, but unfortunately they are the new reality. And even here in the UK today, we've seen an extra £16 billion, so nearly $25 billion, put aside by the government for more offensive cyber warfare technology. And this is something which will continue to ratchet up for a number of years. So once we've got the design requirements right, we then have to get into the development and test. And this comes back to implementing a number of key capabilities, such as secure boot managers, how we're going to do versioning and update management into a lot of these very small embedded devices. We have to put in the right secure key management and identity so that we can individually update devices, so that we're not doing it to all of our devices, and also so that we're not subject to class attacks. So far, so good. And this is where we have a very clear connection with the traditional IAR development base. Beyond that, though, there's a piece in manufacturing. It is really important that we have a secure supply chain. Again, ENISA for the EU have pulled this out as a key requirement. In terms of IP theft, the EU recently released a report which estimated the impact of IP theft is 60 billion euros per year, impacting 300,000 jobs. We have to protect our intellectual property better as an industry. It is really the value that we all create in ourselves. And so we have to ensure that our applications are encrypted, are signed, and only validated equipment can manufacture the devices. And that also inhibits cloning, which is itself, cloning and counterfeiting, a 500 billion a year industry. And it also protects against malware injection in the manufacturing flow. Finally, once we've got the products out there, we have to get onto the life cycle. And of course, every device will be compromised at some point. Every piece of code of any size will have errata in it, and we need to ensure that what we put out there does get managed properly. So having those secure update capabilities are important, and that comes back to what we develop into the design, secure boot and update mechanisms, etc. And protection against malware, ensuring that only properly signed and encrypted code can get updated onto the device. So we just can't introduce any malware, any ransomware. So really we have to look at this holistically. I think that if we come at this from the point of getting the foundations right and getting the security from inception correct, these are the pieces just happen. The right tools, the right approach makes security a lot simpler, but also a lot more cost effective. You're not trying to have to bolt on things after the fact. You can just do it right up front. So we developed the security from inception suite. This really is based around the development tools, embedded trust and C trust. I'll talk more about in a moment. Manufacturing and prototyping capabilities with our secure desktop provisioner, which is a security appliance, a HSM, which enables people to do that back-end prototyping with a properly secured environment with custom generated keys, with the ability to manage and maintain code, and to enable the creation of first articles ready for production and small production lots. We then have the high volume production capability through our secure deploy frameworks and through a number of partners, which we'll be talking about over the next couple of months. And then into the management side. So again, a single package, the security from inception suite, really does give the developers everything they need to get going, to understand about security, to achieve those legislative requirements. But it does it in such a way that the developers and the customer are always in control. They own the source code for the secure boot manager. We generate it for them through wizards, but they own it and they can change it and they can manage it. Similarly, the keys and the cryptography, the PKI, which will underpin identity, is something that we help create and constrain and manage. But ultimately, if people want to bring in their own certificate authority or do it in-house, we absolutely support all of those things. And it's really important that we maintain security sovereignty in our user base and through the developers. There is no one size fits all. When we look at C trust, C trust is a slightly cut down version of our embedded trust platform. We can develop a set of what we term security profiles or security contexts, which suggest a way in which a secure boot would be implemented, updates would be implemented, and identity would be implemented. So each device is uniquely traceable, uniquely manufactured and produced. Now, with embedded trust, you can generate your own security context. So with C trust, we integrate this tightly into the embedded workbench environment from IAR, and then enable the consumption of these security contexts. So this really becomes part of just what you do as the development cycle. It really is a couple of menu items, which basically says, yes, I'm going to enable security in my application. It imports the secure boot manager project, which can be set up through the wizard, and then you just develop as normal. The consequence of this is that the CISO or the engineering management in an organization can define the context. So as a large international company such as Emerson or Honeywell or Philips, you'll probably want to have a consistent approach to security, a consistent approach to identity. And if it's not at a corporate level, it's certainly at a divisional level. So the CISO and their team can define the context, the operating parameters for security, and then hand that off to the development guys for integration into their project. But when you're developing then your application, there is really very, very little impact from the security. It's very easy to use. It works on the vast majority of mainstream microcontrollers already. And where there is a advanced secure microcontroller, we obviously leverage the features in those devices. So security, again, done right, security done early is actually really easy. You don't need to understand the root of trust. You may wish to, and I would absolutely argue that everybody should do that, but it's not a major task. Um, it is really something that inside of 15 minutes, perhaps half an hour, a developer can really get to grasp with all of the security concepts and implement them in existing applications. It really is security now from this point on an existing ST device, NXP device, Renesas device. You can pick up the tool, you can target the device that you're using, and the security is just there from inception. When we talk about security from inception, we have the Inception Suite, as I mentioned earlier. And again, this is a higher level bundle of everything that an OEM would need to do their full development flow. So this covers embedded trust for the generation of your own security contexts, something which is absolutely specific to your organization, and that can be run through wizards or through code generation or wizard, and then you tailor it further. It includes the C trust for the integration into the development flow. It includes the secure desktop provisioner, which really for me is an amazing piece of kit. For the first time, developers can have a HSM on their desk, managing their keys, managing their security, enabling the full development of prototypes with security at the center of them. We've never been able to do that before as an industry. And with the latest version, that also supports the IAR iJet and the Renesas E2 Lite programmer. In addition, in Inception Suite, we have a copy of Workbench, a copy of CStat, because static analysis is an important part of security, and also a host of training capabilities. I know that security is a very frightening thing for people. In most cases, it really is just an extension of quality and some basic concepts around secure boot and management of the device. But we can work with OEMs to help educate them on the impacts of the legislation all the way through to the implementation of the device. So we really have, I think, a wraparound solution there, which hits that balance between making security really easy and something that you can buy, security as a service, and yet giving the customers all of the flexibility that they need in their development environment for whichever application they are developing, either consumer or industrial or smart city, smart transportation.
Excellent presentation, Haydn. You said something that I want to call you out on because I hear it all the time. You will be hacked at some point for sure. Why do all the experts say that? Why are you so sure that every system will be hacked at some point?
I think it's human nature. I think if anything can be built, there's always somebody wanting to tear it apart. There are different motivations for it, to be sure. When we look at smart transportation systems, industrial, smart city, the reality is all of these are going to be targets from a cyber warfare perspective. It's an unfortunate reality. When Admiral Rogers at the NSA did an audit of the US power grid, over 25% of nodes were found to contain some form of Trojan. The ability to take down an opponent's power grid or transportation system or traffic lights or whatever is very high on the kind of next generation warfare domain. Moving away from that, though, we see ransomware running rife. And the problem with ransomware is you can't always impact where it's going to hit. So we've seen things like Norsk Hydro with their aluminium plant. That was $52 million worth of damage from an OT hack. But we've also seen in Germany where a standard cyber attack went wrong at a university. It then hit a university hospital, and it meant that one of the patients had to be rerouted on the way to hospital, and unfortunately she died. So these things, there's a law of unintended consequences. Below that, there's also, though, the script kiddies. And these are just really smart kids finding out new and novel ways how to break things. And this has been going on for as long as we've been making things. I remember at university, some of my friends broke the local or nationwide telecom systems so they could make free calls.
Wasn't you?
It happens. It wasn't me, honest, and I wouldn't put my hand up for it if it was. So these things, unfortunately, they do happen, and everything which is connected is going to be subject to this unless there is sufficient level of security. And typically what that means is it has to be financially unviable for somebody to hack you. If they're spending more money hacking you than the money they'll get back from doing it, they'll find other targets.
Okay, so if somebody wants more information, obviously they can go to the Secure Thingz site, the IAR site. What are other resources for people?
So that's a great place to start. Beyond that, certainly also the IoT Security Foundation, the IoT securityfoundation.org is a great set of resources. I maintain a seat on the board of the IoTSF. And that's really been the leading place for evolving a lot of these requirements. Beyond that, the EU standards are now available. As I say, the EN 303645, a simple search on that will identify the ETSI organization for that. And again, recently we've seen ENISA release their cybersecurity, IoT cybersecurity guidelines. So those are all great resources. Beyond that, the IEC have information on the 62443. I would absolutely recommend people look at those to understand what they need to protect, what is a must-have, what is a nice-to-have, and beyond that, it's then figuring out how to implement it. And from my perspective, I think our tools really do help people solve those problems a lot quicker and a lot cheaper.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was Haydn Povey. He is the CEO of Secure Thingz. He's also the general manager of the Embedded Security Solutions Division at IAR Systems.